and welcome to Choices Global. I'm Dr. Salisha Pariag, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join us today. We are dedicated to providing you with an up to date information and valuable guidance to help you lead a better quality of life. In this week's episode, we will delve deeper into the theme of family and explore the topic of financial freedom within the family unit. We understand that family is at the core of our lives, and managing finances plays a crucial role in nurturing strong and healthy relationships. Joining us today are esteemed guests, Mr. and Mrs. Christopher Roberts, who have been happily married for 11 years, and are parents to three teenage daughters. Mr. and Mrs. Rawl Duncan, who celebrated 12 years of marriage, and are parents to four lovely, budding young people. And Mr. and Mrs. Kurt Corbin, who you're all familiar with, they have been married for 17 years, and together they have three young men. Together, we will engage in a meaningful discussion about family finances. Our guests will generously share their insights, personal experiences, and practical advice to help us build stronger connections, overcome financial challenges, and create a harmonious financial environment within our families. It is important, however, to know that the information provided in this program is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered as financial advice or a substitute for personal financial guidance. So, we strongly recommend consulting with a qualified financial advisor or professional before making any financial decisions or investments. So, welcome to our panelists. And to get us started today, we want to discuss, as I said earlier, financial freedom in the family. To our panelists, what are some common financial challenges that families face today, and how can they be overcome? I'm going to start with the Roberts, Christopher and Latoya. Tell us your insights as a family unit. What are your experiences?
Good morning. Thanks for having us. And we've been
Morning.
married for 20 years.
Oh, sorry, my
Yes.
bad. 20 years. Wow, congratulations.
Yes, thank you. Some of the challenges, financial challenges that couples and families have, mortgage payments,
Mhm.
rent, transportation, tuition, you know, car payments, utilities, the common payments, food, clothing. Um, and we find it challenging sometimes with having these payments to be made. However, with planning and budgeting and good communication, saving,
Mhm.
we're able to overcome those challenges.
Okay.
Well, just to
Yeah,
add,
okay, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
oh, sir, um, it's basically a case of, well, while not trying to be sung too spiritual like you would have mentioned earlier, what I have found what we found as a couple for is that the ability to overcome these things, these challenges in
Mm-hmm.
terms of the necessary payments that are made. We have found that it hasn't been such a like a burden, like like a
Okay.
Damocles, a sword of
Mm-hmm.
Damocles, because what
Mm-hmm.
we found is that once we've put aside what are necessary and we give to the Lord what is His
Mm-hmm.
requirement, it
Mm-hmm.
has been a tremendous ease.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something like you wait, like you worry about, oh, one this will come again, when it will come again. It's like
Mm-hmm.
it happens and it works itself
Okay.
out.
Okay. Thank you. Rawl and Melinda, what have you found as
Thank
a
you, Dr.
family unit some
Susan.
of the common? Mm-hmm.
So, not for our family as an example. But generally, when talking with couples, what the major issue is who makes more money, and whose responsibility it is to pay the 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 most of the bills. And
Mhm.
for example, the men, who makes more money, and if the man is responsible for mortgage payments, car notes, he's responsible. Then what happens to the female's money? What happens to the wife's money? So it's about who makes more, who brings in more income, and then
Mhm.
everything else may or may not fall into place after they figure that one main issue out.
Very good.
Mhm.
Another challenge I think married couples face as well, in addition to what Melinda is saying, is trying to figure out when you are now joined together,
Mhm.
how is this thing really going to work out, right? You've had your finances
Separate.
separate. I've had my finances separate. Now, when we come together, how can we now join
Hmm.
our finances and work together as a couple, instead of
Mhm.
you just doing your own thing, I'm doing my own thing. So in this case, it requires a discussion, right? Regardless of who
Correct.
makes more money or not,
Hmm.
you're working towards a common
Mhm.
goal.
You should be.
You have certain
Hmm.
responsibilities that you're taking care of. Thank you. You should be working towards a common goal.
Correct.
You have
Correct.
certain
Correct. Mhm.
responsibilities that you need to take care of. And how are we going
Mhm.
to approach that as a team? We're no longer siloed, but
Hmm.
how will we approach these financial issues as a team?
Got you. Got you. Thank you. Siobhan and Kurt, what have
Well,
been your experiences?
okay. So I think one or two things from me, and I'll piggyback on what Raul has said. I think that one of the issues is that managing your personal finance, even as a single person, is a journey that we must be clear on. What is our
Mhm.
relationship with money? Are we spenders?
Mhm.
Are we savers? Are we investors? Those kinds of questions. And so, because we've not formed those in our personal lives or our single lives, then, as Raul said, when we come together, it becomes difficult for us as a family unit to define
Mhm.
our financial identity. And I don't know if it's a term, but it's one I've embraced, right? How do we how do we determine our financial identity as a family? I think that's one challenge, and I think added to that is the fact that because we don't have these kinds of personal financial chats. I don't want to call it training. It seems so formal.
Mhm.
Because we don't have these kinds of forums to discuss it, and we thank God for Choices Global and First Assembly as a unit that does this kind of work or educating. I find that when we now get into depth, then it becomes a bigger burden. We are then
Mhm.
frustrated with each other. And so oftentimes couples don't realize that a lot of the conflict is coming
Mhm.
because we are under financial pressure. And so hopefully we'll
Mhm.
discuss a bit more about it, Kurt.
Yeah, you're right, Siobhan. If I may, Dr. Salisha, quickly, we're talking about challenges and financial challenges in family. And one of the things I would think that is an issue is work. Work is
Mhm.
God's primary way of allowing us to provide for ourselves and family. And in some
Mhm.
cases, some families do not work, or a member of the family does not work for varying reasons. And this is the first challenge because we're talking variant
Mhm.
scenarios, not necessarily one scenario. So if you do not work, of course, it becomes a challenge. Some persons choose
Mhm.
not to work. So that's an even bigger challenge. And if we don't work, we cannot provide. So all of these are
Mhm.
things that we need to understand. Different families bring or face different challenges. So
Mhm.
work is critical and work is important, and that's the only way, or not only, that's the predominant way that we can provide for our family.
Mhm.
The
Correct.
second challenge I think I want to just leave out there now is planning. We need to plan.
Mhm.
Once we work,
Mhm.
we need to plan. If we don't work, we need to plan how to get a job. And when we're working, we need to plan how we will, as was said before with all of us, how we spend, how we budget, how we save, how we invest. And I'll hand back to
Mhm.
you, Doctor.
Yeah, all three of you, the couples, have you've what is critical or what is underlining, I believe, in this discussion is communication, because you
Mm-hmm.
must communicate what are your expectations. I liked what Siobhan's talked about financial identity, because what you bring in as a single person into the marriage will determine how you will also treat and approach money. And this has been, we've seen reports talk about one of the major pitfalls in marriages today, or unions, really surrounds
Hmm.
how people
Mm-hmm.
deal with finances, how they approach finances. And communication, I think the Roberts did talk about, mention that communicating is critical. When it's important for families to communicate openly about financial challenges, to set realistic goals, and then to seek professional advice when needed. We find sometimes we believe that we can handle it on our own, but it's also critical as a family when we can seek out professional help and advice. Each family situation is unique, and we
Mm-hmm.
will, so as we examine the challenges, and I'm going to pivot into what Kurt mentioned earlier: planning. How can families create? And so I'm going now into our discussion with the bolts and nuts. How can families create and stick to a budget that accommodates their financial goals and priorities? Melinda and Raul, how your experiences in creating and sticking to a budget?
That's Raw's. That is Raw's area of expertise. I must say that.
Good,
But
good,
before
good.
he goes into that, it is important to understand, and I love to encourage couples to, in your premarital counseling or your remarital counseling, whichever one it is, it's important for you to discuss finances, as was said. And I just felt that I should repeat it because I know lots of families are struggling
Yeah.
because they did not take the time to do premarital counseling, where you will delve into those marital
Hmm.
issues and concerns that can potentially harm your marriage, and so forth. But Rawls' area of expertise.
Okay, thank you. So I believe what we need to start off with here is that at least one person in the marriage, even if you're not a financial person, you need to make the sacrifice to learn how to handle finances. If you cannot shoulder that burden by yourself, both of you need to get involved in understanding how finances work. So, in saying that, communication is a big thing. Let's say Melinda and I work, Melinda gets paid or I get paid, and we all just put the money in one account. And if our premarital discussion was that I will handle all the finances, we just put all in one bucket and we distribute everything else from there, then Melinda does not need to be involved. It all depends on the plan that works for you.
Mm-hmm.
But there must be discussion, there must be communication, especially if you are now starting off, you're newly married. There might be some financial things that you need to work out. Don't just go out there and say, okay, I'm going to do this, that, and it's not going to work out for you in the long
Mm-hmm.
run. So there needs to be communication. There needs to be, we've set aside times where we actually sit
And do budgeting.
and do budgeting, talk about
Mm-hmm.
finances. Like Melinda mentioned, I'm usually the budget person, but I also want her to be knowledgeable. Um, because I always think, what if I'm not there? What if I'm not able to do this? What if I'm not able to do something?
Mm-hmm.
My spouse, my wife, also needs to have that knowledge to approach finances. So definitely making a plan, communication. If one is stronger than the other in finances, you want to give that person the benefit of the doubt. Do your own research. Um, we're in the age of the internet. There's a, oh boy, there's a sea, there are oceans of information there that we can access, both in your country and in ours. You do your own research and you put all of these things
And find
together.
which works best for you, because every
Definitely.
every couple is unique. So you find which system works best, financial system works best for your family.
Yes, yes, yes. So definitely
Excellent.
it's a holistic approach. So thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for that, Roland, Melinda. The Roberts, Christopher Nutter, what are some effective strategies for saving money as a family, especially when dealing with limited resources? What have you found?
Well, we have found that um, we communicate a lot, and we found that saving was the number one thing because we had all these talks before marriage,
Hmm.
and we found that we come together and we save. That is priority. We handle our bills, the bills come in. It's not a matter for us, what we found, it's not a matter of who is making more or who is responsible for certain bills. This is the household, these are the bills. They need to be paid, so the money comes in, the bills are put aside, they're paid, and we save. And in whatever area you find that you splurge, you cut down on that, be considerate of the other person because there's a budget to work towards. So be considerate, do just the necessaries for yourself, cut down on your wants and get your needs met.
Well, basically, that's it in a nutshell. But what we have found, even prior to getting, when we were married, and we took, it was 2 years prior to getting children, I would have told my wife, I said, listen, this is our time to splurge. This is our time to do whatever, because you see, when children get here, it's going to be a whole different ballgame. But I mean, that was my take on it then. But we realized that even with the advent of the children, it wasn't as severe as we thought it would have been. But what it taught us basically is to you have to demarcate what is your needs, what is your wants,
Yeah.
and then you determine at that stage, but you still leave a little leeway because there's always you must should have flexibility because there are things that you don't cater for that actually comes up. So, there you must have that kind of flexibility. But it's basically as long as you have determined what your bills are and what is the remainder, we have been able to make that work. It's a little stiff at times, like there are months when it's might be a little worse than the other months. But, you know, it hasn't been anything that has overwhelmed us, basically.
Got you. And what I'm hearing, it's basically staying on top of it. And again,
Mm-hmm.
what comes through communication. I think that is key in determining what you do, how you save, what you save. Kurt and Chevon, I know you have college age children. How can families plan for long term financial security, such as retirement planning or college savings?
One word, moderator: discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
We heard the two previous couples, Roland Melinda,
mhm.
Christopher and Latoya, and it's good to have a plan, and you must have a plan. Even I mentioned that, but then the plan is only as
Yes,
good as the person working it. So if you
Working
don't,
it.
mhm,
if you lack discipline, all your plans go through the window. So
Yeah.
correct.
ha- with the advent of children, like Christopher and Latoya said, they they had to adjust their splurging plan. It is a good thing
Mhm.
that they did adjust it because their children, the college this college age, I think, or soon it will be college age for them. So understanding, using Chris and Latoya as an example, understanding what he said and how what they said and how we understood that for 2 years or the first 2 years of their marriage, they had a particular situation and they worked at that situation. And as that situation changed, they were willing and they were knowledgeable enough to change and adjust. And I'm sure with that, as you mentioned, they spend and they also take care of their bills and then they put aside. So that is basically it. And to do that, you have to have discipline. You see what your salary is, both of you, that is. and then you work that plan. What does it require for us to save? The children will be going to college in 20 years, in 10 years, and in how many years? How much should we be saving to send the first child to college? What about if you have twins like us? You have to send two of them off at one time. That's a different plan, a different thinking. And trust me, we are experiencing that right now because they'll be going off to college soon. And personally, I think I wish we'd begun saving before, but that's a problem that we're trying to share here on this program about talking about money and being financially free in families. Sometimes at the beginning, you're not always aware, and the more information you get, the better you're prepared and the better you act. So, in my case personally, I wish we had begun saving before. I wish it began investing before, but that's another conversation as well, Siobhan. If you want to add.
Well, from my side, I would say wisdom, and I think Kurt alluded to seeking more knowledge on the different ways in which you can prepare. One thing I would caution families is not to think short term. Oftentimes, we think about earning our salary, we may do a budget about how we spend it, and then we move on to the next paycheck. So, short term is one thing we shouldn't do. What we can do is what all of the other speakers or panelists have said. One is about writing down your plan, but it's about discussing it with your partner and ensuring we have the same goals. Because if we're talking to the audience now, there might be some woman or man or husband or wife out there saying, but I like to save and my spouse is spending everything. I would say, again, communication, getting to this sense of oneness. Oneness is not only in intimacy, sexually or emotionally, but it's also financially. Some other tips that I would want to leave with us is a few. One is, Salisha, you talked about saving for retirement. If you are an employed person, most times in the Guyana context, you would have your NIS saved. You might have other kinds of insurance options being given to you that allows you to save with some component going to the pension or retirement. I would advise to opt for those because it's easier when the salary is being deducted at source for many of us who may not have the discipline that Kurt talked about. In my context, meaning in the US or in the Swiss context, there are also similar deductions that come out. And once those deductions come out, it's important not to trouble it unless you're taking it for some kind of major investment. Some pension funds would allow you to take some component of it to invest in a home. That shouldn't be your primary home. That should be maybe your secondary home, which is an investment property. Another example is maybe you have a credit union. In our context, I started asking the office to deduct this money so that it goes to this credit union account and you don't see it. So seeing it means you try not to touch it. But another one that I'd want to leave is sometimes as children are going off to college, we are thinking of only the most expensive colleges. And it's okay to dream for the Ivy Leagues if we can afford it. But sometimes it's also important to choose a lower end bachelor's degree and then invest the savings that you are still making in an Ivy League master's degree. I'll stop there.
What those are some interesting takeaways. I think critical to just recapping, critical to the retirement and college savings. Capitalize on whatever the workplace is offering, and what if there is a matching. If the employer is matching that, try to maximize that matching as well. Um, Siobhan, I'm hearing you talk about more like automated savings. Do
Mm-hmm.
transfers, set those things up early ahead, even for a year ahead. And you don't see that money moving into other accounts. You set up these automated saving plans where money is moved from your main source account to other savings accounts where you don't touch it. Those are critical things because when we consider inflation, sometimes what the value of $1 million, million Guyana dollars, or 25,000 US dollars, or Swiss francs. We're talking about the value in 5 years would reduce and will not be able to do the same things that we expected it would do now. I like your idea, Chevon, of looking at lower price colleges. You're not selling yourself short, but getting that initial bachelor's and then moving into uh, a different university, Ivy League university, if you can afford it, because student loans are now upon us. But one final consideration in saving and planning, as we talked about discipline, communication keeps coming up, and let's pivot now into investing. What consideration can we give to investing as a means to seeking financial freedom? Siobhan, you mentioned a rental property if it's possible. Even having a vehicle, where we think about we want to have two or three vehicles that we want to own, but are they assets or liabilities? What income is attached to those assets as we acquire them? It's nice to have three cars parked in your on your driveway, but are they income bearing assets, or they're just liabilities because you're just paying out of them? So Siobhan and Kurt, can you talk to us a little about investing as a means to seeking financial freedom? You started with a rental property, but can you add to that? And then I'll come to Roland, Melinda, and Christopher, and Latoya will close it out.
Sure. Dr. Salisha, if I reflect on investing, I'd like to be provocative and say, let's look at what the rich or the wealthy do. And this is not to say that we are not rich or wealthy, but you gave the example of the car. The rich or the wealthy will invest in what we call them, these old um, the old cars that gain value, meaning the first edition of these, unique models. The rich will invest in artwork because with time that gains. And I want to leave a little story with us as I give this example. I was talking with one of my sons, and he was asking, why did people buy gold in the old days? And so I gave him the example that if I had $7 million 15 years ago, it could have bought me a house. But if I left that 7 million in the bank at today's rate, I could only get maybe one bedroom or a bedroom and a half with it. And this is the kind of financial information we need to understand that when we save, if we leave it all in the bank, it is only gaining very minimal interest, but the value of the cash is being lost over time. And this is why investing is important. Saving is important because you keep some cash to be liquid if you have an emergency. But beyond that, investing now allows you to gain what we call passive income, meaning income that is working while we are still sleeping. And so, in that case, I would want to encourage our viewers that for us, there are many ways we can invest depending on where we are living. For us living in the what we call the first world, you can invest in shares and bonds and stocks. In the Guyana context or the Caribbean context, we can do so, but because our economic situation is often volatile or impacted by what happens in the financial markets of the West, then you could have companies which go bust and many persons have invested and lost. Other ways are investing in your neighborhood business or your family business, because in that way, when it grows, you gain. Of course, there are all the other caveats of ensuring there are strict agreements, even if it's family or friend. Investing in homes is another one that we often suggest, that you could have an investment property which is aside from your own property. And others may say, but I don't have money to invest in the second home. In that case, I would often say that now that Airbnb has become a thing and it's arrived even in Guyana, then persons who have maybe been retired and did not have the opportunity to invest earlier can now say, the kids have left the nest and I probably have one room vacant. let me, and I like to beautify the place, then let me do that and rent out one room as an Airbnb, or on the other rental platforms that they offer online. But investing is important because it gives you the passive income. And that is actually when you become financially free. Because if you are working one job and depending on a single income, if that job closes or we get ill, God forbid, there are things that just happen in life, then we are impacted. And so, this is why investing is important for us to consider as we do our family long term planning. Don't think short term, always think long term. Kurt?
Yeah, thank you, Siobhan. You said it. You said it all. I would just like to add: you never in investing, never invest monies that you're not prepared to lose. I must have add that caveat. Never invest money you're not prepared to lose. Investing is never a sure thing, but it's a I would say it's an important aspect of our saving and planning. As we heard, saving as well depreciates depending on what you invest in. You can have however many returns. You have a child and you know they'll be going to school in 20 years, you can take out that long-term investment plan. And all of us have something that we can invest in, I must add. If you're not sure how to invest, then you invest in yourself first. You go and get that education, invest in yourself. If you think you're too mature, as Siobhan indicated, invest it in your children that they go and learn so that they can utilize your finances correctly. Have that conversation with them. In our lifetime, in our growing up, we didn't have that conversation with our parents, or we didn't had it enough. So we're sharing. You have that conversation with your child or children. If you're not sure, you're still uncomfortable, ensure you invest in a program that they can learn so that you will break that cycle. And I would stop there, Dr. Salisha.
Thank you so much, Kurt and Chevron. Wrap up comments, Roland, Melinda.
What I would first say is that we were taught to be consumers. So learning how
Mm,
to invest and to get into all of these things, these are fairly new concepts to us. So the first thing I would offer is the word balance. Having a portfolio where you have balance, you already have your job where you have your checking and your savings. Yes, those things are good. But now we're looking at investing. What I would advise that you invest in some things that are a bit riskier than others, put a small percentage into that because they usually have a higher return. And you also invest in safer stocks, bonds, and these things such as real estate. And so it's developing that balance where you want to remember now you're trying to secure a future for you, your children. The Bible encourages us, or the Bible talks about generational wealth. So, in doing all of this, we now have to make the sacrifice to understand finances and put our monies in places where we will get that return so that we can invest. I always ask God to make me wealthy because I want to contribute to the kingdom. That's just one of my things. But you can have different means of why you invest, but definitely,
mhm.
ultimately, the goal is security. Thank you.
Thank you. Um, Christopher and Latoya, in 60 seconds.
Okay, basically, like Kurt would have said previously, don't invest what you can't afford to lose.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, based on our economy, these things happen. I
Mm-hmm.
have invested for the family in various aspects, and some have been successful, some have not. But it is something that you have to take as you go with,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
But I am one of the things that Chevron would have spoken of, that is quite popular, and it's something that we're currently looking at, is the Airbnb. That is something, and the good thing about that is that you don't have to have a lot to go for that. And it is something that you can relax basically later on. whilst the income comes in. And the other thing that we would have taken on board, and I've spoken with my wife about, is investing in the children so that they will be the ones basically who will be carrying on the future and our economic aspects in life.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all our panelists. And we thank you, our audience, for joining us for part one of this enlightening journey as we explore the intersection of family and financial freedom. The practical solutions, shared experiences, and inspiration from our panelists will help us in making informed choices that lead to a better financial future. Mark your calendars, July 30th, as we eagerly anticipate the culmination of this series, Finding Financial Freedom in the Family. We extend our heartfelt appreciation for tuning in to Choices Global this evening or whenever you're viewing it. And remember, be kind. See you soon.